One for our rights. One in search of hope. One in our fights. One beyond borders. One beyond our race.
This could be one
in the face of adversity. We are one, you and I, and it's our right to know how and why. WION, you are more connected than you know. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. Israeli cast votes for cities, towns and regional councils, an election that was twice delayed because of the ongoing war in Gaza and in the north. Hamas receives a draft proposal from Gaza truce talks in Paris, which includes a 40-day pause in all military operations and the exchange of Palestinian prisoners for Israeli hostages at a ratio of 10-1, says a Reuters exclusive report. Three Palestinians are killed by Israeli forces in West Bank clashes, claims official Palestinian news agency Wafa. An accountability court in Rawalpindi indicts Pakistan Tehreek el-Insaf founder Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Bibi al-Qadhia University Trust case. The National Accountability Bureau had accused them of acquisition of hundreds of canals of land under the name of the trust. India's anti-terror agency NIA conducts searches and raids across the states of Punjab and Rajasthan. At least 6 people questioned in Khalistani terror-related activities. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announces the names of 4 astronauts who are undergoing training for India's maiden human spaceflight mission, Gaganyaan. Al Hilal set a record with their 14th straight win in the Saudi Pro League. The leaders beat Steven Gerrard's Al Ettifaq 2-0 to go 7 points clear. The UK government wants to introduce sweeping tax cuts in the upcoming spring budget on March 6th. But the problem is there are no funds for potential giveaways, given the recent shifts in the stance of the Bank of England on rate hikes. However, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has been vocal about his intentions to cut taxes in the spring budget. Hunt is expected to focus on reducing national insurance rather than income tax and introducing a new levy on vaping. Despite Hunt's ambitions, the financial markets are showing increased caution about the extent of Bank of England rate cuts. This means the Chancellor may have less money than initially anticipated just a few weeks ago. In a twist to all these plans, an economic think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, or the IFS, has criticised Hunt's financial planning, calling it dubious and lacking credibility. The IFS is warning against tax cuts without a clear funding strategy. The IFS suggests Hunt might need to find £35 billion of $44.4 billion in cuts from existing public services to fund pre-election giveaways. The think tank has also underlined the importance of concrete plans over vague pledges. It further stressed that with public finances remaining in a challenging position, the economic case for tax cuts is weak. Meanwhile, as the anticipation builds for the spring budget on March 6, the pressure is mounting on the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt to strike a balance between populist measures like tax cuts and addressing the longer-term economic challenges. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by our correspondent Julia Chapman in London. Julia, a dilemma for the Chancellor, desperate to give tax cuts ahead of a potential general election, or a definite general election, should I say, but of course, not much money in the kitty to do so.
And that's right. And what we aren't seeing yet is that forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is due to be published on the same day as the budget, which, of course, the Chancellor has received. And there have been reports that the fiscal headroom that he was expecting to have isn't quite as big as he might have hoped. There were estimates that it could be around £10 billion, which would allow him to make some tax cuts. That is, of course, because interest rates have been falling. That means that the amount that the government is paying to service its debts, which are quite high, would be falling in the near future as well. But as gilt yields have jumped up recently, or are expected to continue doing so, it's thought that the OBR hasn't given the government quite as much breathing room to cut taxes as had previously been predicted. Now, this is a government that has, over the course of this parliament, under former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and now under Rishi Sunak himself, has in fact overseen the largest increase in taxes since the Second World War. The tax take at the moment is the highest it's been since records began, apart from, of course, that brief period where Liz Truss was Prime Minister and slashed taxes very dramatically, only to see them go back up again under Rishi Sunak. But what we are seeing from the government is this hope that ahead of the election they can cut some taxes as a sweetener to incentivize voters to put their trust behind the Conservative Party when it comes to casting their ballots later this year. Now, what they are hoping to do is to build on the tax cuts that they oversaw at the autumn statement last year, which were relatively minor compared to the overall tax rises we've been seeing over the past few years. So although they did make mostly businesses better off, they haven't really contributed to a serious reduction in the tax burden. This time around, what we were expecting was more of a cut to personal taxes, making income tax go down. We know that the freeze on income thresholds, so the amount of money that you have to earn before you start paying tax, that's due to be frozen from next year for 3 years. That effectively increases the tax take as well. But the government was hoping that there would be something they could offer the taxpayer to make things a little bit easier this year. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like now that the OBR has handed over its forecast to the government. But think tanks are warning that there needs to be a seriously close look at public spending. There are services across the country that are buckling. Healthcare has been one area that the Chancellor has wanted to increase spending on, defence as well. And those are areas that are ring-fenced. They can't have tax cuts. They can't have public spending cuts in those areas. But there are certainly areas where there could be cuts, including the justice sector and local councils. Local councils have been struggling hugely under this government. There have been successive cuts to their funding since 2010 when the Conservatives came into power. So we're already seeing services really under pressure there, and warnings from organisations like the IFS as well as the International Monetary Fund saying rather than cutting taxes, the government really needs to increase spending on public services. The problem for them from a political point of view is that those kind of benefits take a little bit longer to come through, and they want to see an immediate boost to their polling prospects ahead of the general election.
Julia Chapman joining us live from London. Many thanks for your insight there. Around 20 European leaders and representatives of other nations met in Paris to discuss the war in Ukraine. The host, French President Emmanuel Macron, announced new steps to boost military aid to Ukraine. Macron said the Russian defeat is crucial to the security and stability in Europe, while adding that the leaders gathered to send Russian President Vladimir Putin a message of European determination on Ukraine. He said Moscow is showing more aggressive nature, not just in Ukraine, but in general, while highlighting that he cannot rule out sending troops on the ground in Ukraine.
Everything was discussed in a free and direct manner tonight. There was no consensus today to send troops onto the ground in a manner that's official, assumed and endorsed. But on the dynamic, nothing should be excluded. We will do everything so that Russia cannot win this war. We should not exclude that there might be a need for security that then justifies some elements for deployment. But I've told you very clearly what France maintains as its position, which is a strategic ambiguity that I stand by. Nothing should be excluded to pursue our goals.
The leaders in Paris discussed the formation of a new coalition to supply Ukraine with missiles and bombs of medium and long range. The Dutch PM said that the Netherlands will contribute $108 million to a Czech initiative. That's to buy ammunition for Ukraine from countries across the world. According to the Czech Prime Minister, some 15 countries have shown interest in the initiative. In Paris, countries have been asked to come up with plans in the next 10 days to deliver more munitions to Ukraine. Earlier, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, said Kyiv has received less than a third of the 1 million artillery shells that the European Union vowed to deliver. That pledge was made by the EU last year. However, in January, it acknowledged that it will be able to supply only half of the initial 1 million shells. In Paris, Macron said a leap is required from the West in its approach, whilst adding that leaders should now consider the transformation of the threat from a military and strategic point of view. Meanwhile, writing on his personal blog, the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, says Europe is in danger with two wars on its doorstep. Borrell also added that the era of Western dominance has indeed definitively ended. On the other hand, Putin has vowed to boost the military ability of Russian special forces. The Russian president vowed to increase the mobility and striking potential of Russia's special operation forces. The Russian special forces have been involved in Moscow's invasion of Ukraine since 2022.
Наша общая трагедия. Почему? Потому что это так же, как в 90-е, в начале 2000-х годов. Лучше сегодня, чем завтра. Стало очевидным уже тогда.
The US President Joe Biden has said that Israel has agreed to halt its Gaza offensive during the holy month of Ramadan under a ceasefire deal that is being negotiated. Negotiators from Egypt, Qatar, the United States and France are working with the warring sides, Israel and Hamas, and have been for weeks now. They're working to clinch a deal to seek a halt to the 5-month-long fighting, which has claimed more than 30,000 lives so far. According to a Reuters report, Hamas has received a draft proposal from Gaza truce talks in Paris, which includes a 40-day pause in all military operations and the exchange of Palestinian prisoners for Israeli hostages at a ratio of 10-1. According to the report by Reuters, under the proposed ceasefire, hospitals and bakeries in Gaza would be repaired and 500 aid trucks would enter into the enclave each day. Well, in New York, Biden was asked when such agreement might start, and Biden responded by saying a deal is very close and that he hopes that a ceasefire will be achieved by Monday.
I hope by the beginning of the weekend. The end of the weekend. At least my national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday we'll have a ceasefire.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had earlier dismissed the troop withdrawal demand as delusional. He said any ceasefire deal would only delay a military incursion into the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Around 1.4 million Palestinians have sought shelter in Rafah as Israeli forces took down other Gazan cities. Israeli forces marched into Gaza days after the Hamas militant group launched the October 7th attack. Nearly 1,200 people were killed in Israel and more than 250 were taken hostage. 130 hostages, including 31 presumed dead, remain in Gaza after a one-week truce in November helped secure the release of some other hostages. Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says over 29,000 people have been killed in Israel, in the Israeli onslaught, that followed the October 7th attacks. Well, for more on this, we earlier spoke to our correspondent Jodie Cohen from Ranana. And Jodie, what more can you tell us about the hopes for a truce deal, and can you see it happening within the next week?
So President Biden has said that he hopes for a deal to release more hostages and have a pause in the fighting, potentially over the weekend or by Monday. Now, that's a few days before Biden's State of the Union address and roughly 1 week before Ramadan begins. And on CBS, he said that Israel had agreed to halt Gaza action during Ramadan under a truce deal. Now, Israel has said before that it would carry out the operation against the last 25% of Hamas battalions who are in Rafah by Ramadan if the deal to release more hostages is not agreed, but that if a deal is agreed, that would involve a pause in the fighting. Now, according to reports, a deal would involve a pause of roughly 6 weeks, the release of approximately 40 Israeli hostages, and the early release from prison of roughly 400 Palestinian security prisoners. And Hamas is said to be examining the deal now, and it remains to be seen if they agree.
UK's food inflation dropped to a 2-year low. This comes amid a fierce price war among supermarkets. Meanwhile, a report reveals the growth of the UK's net zero economy with a 9% surge in 2023. But it's not all smooth sailing as retail sales took a dip, signalling mounting cost pressures. According to the British Retail Consortium, February saw a significant drop in the cost of meat, fish and fruit. That was resulting in a 5% rise in food prices compared to last year, down from January's 6.1%. This decline, attributed to a price war between supermarkets and reduced energy costs, marks the lowest food inflation rate in nearly 2 years. Additionally, the first monthly drop in food prices since September reflects retailers' efforts to fiercely compete and keep prices down amid the ongoing cost of living crisis. Shifting focus to the economy's green sector, a report unveils the robust growth of the UK's net zero economy. In 2023, this sector surged by 9%, contributing $94 billion in goods and services while generating 765,000 jobs. The report highlights the widespread disruption of net zero businesses across the nation, dispelling the notion of concentration solely in London and the South East. Areas traditionally seen as economically deprived are now becoming hubs for net zero businesses, generating well-paid jobs. It also underscores the economic potential of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Interestingly, many of these hotspots for green growth are located within politically competitive, conservative-held constituencies, making net zero a crucial issue in the upcoming general election. However, amid these positive strides, challenges do loom on the horizon. Retail sales experienced a modest decline in February, signalling escalating cost pressures faced by businesses. The report also points to policy reversals and a lack of investment as threats to the continued growth of the net zero economy. With the need for accelerated infrastructure development and strategic investments, the question arises, will authorities rise to the occasion and provide the necessary stability and support? Well, that remains to be seen.